Hi HR Nation, welcome back to another episode of the HR Leaders Podcast, the show where we explore the future of work with industry experts and HR executives in the world's leading global brands. Today we have something a little different for you. We've got a special guest on the show. We're going to be joined by Rob Shavell, CEO and co-founder of Abine and Delete Me. Welcome to the show, Rob. How are you?
I'm well. Thanks for having me.
Tell everyone a little bit more about yourself personally and your journey to where we are today.
Sure. I'm a typical entrepreneur, completely unemployable by anyone. I even, one time when I started out my career in New York, I was even let go from a job in the early days of the internet where I was working for free. So if somebody's not willing to hire you when you're not even getting paid, you better go create your own company because It's the only option, Chris.
What made you unemployable?
Longer story.
Too many questions about, but he was like, why are we doing this? Why are we doing it that way? Shouldn't we do it another way?
Probably too skeptical and asking too many questions.
Yeah.
But another, another thing is I'm a contrarian by nature. So if everybody's going left, I want to typically go right.
Mm-hmm. And tell everyone a bit more about your expertise, because I was excited when the team reached out, because it's not typical that I would have someone like yourself with your experience and background on the show, which is one of the reasons why I'm excited about this conversation.
Sure. Well, I actually started my career in market research at a company not too far away from probably where you are, called Data Monitor, which is a British-based market research firm. And I ran the U.S. technology group for the company. And in doing so, I got to talk to a lot of HR and other executives and learn how they thought about their markets and their data. And from that, I was able to better understand the trends in the technology world and was lucky enough to get a job in venture capital in Silicon Valley with SoftBank. And that's where the contrarian and right and left thing really come together, because I saw so many look-alike businesses in Silicon Valley all trying to do the same thing at the same time, that 10 years ago when Facebook was just about to IPO and everybody was super excited about data sharing, I decided with a couple much smarter engineers from MIT to start a privacy company, because we felt like all of this sharing had to have a balance and an equilibrium that wasn't available to most consumers.
Mm-hmm. So tell everyone a bit more about the two companies that you run now.
Yeah, so it's really just one company with a parent. So Abine is a privacy company that creates tools and services for one reason and one reason only: to protect the privacy of organizations and the privacy of individuals and families. And we really do that through two principal products. One is called Blur. And what that does is it creates alias information instead of using your real information that you can submit. So for example, if you want to make a transaction online and you don't want to give this particular site your real credit card or bank information, you can create a on-the-fly virtual credit card for just that amount that you would like.
And it will still work, even though it's a virtual credit card?
Still work. It's a regular Visa or MasterCard.
Wow.
And it will still work fine. And that way you've protected yourself from both data breaches and the tracking that happens when you use your credit card, because in addition to the threat of just having your card stolen and having to go through all the problems when that happens, there's a lot of tracking and invasion of your privacy that happens when you shop. Yeah. And so this protects you on both dimensions. And so Blur does that also for your email address, that moment where you decide, hey, do I want to give these folks my email, or do I want to give them my throwaway email or whatever? So we create unique email addresses, phone numbers, credit cards, so that you can basically compartmentalize your personal life and only share it with those that you're willing, those vendors or third parties or websites that you want to share it with or that you trust. And then you can create a little bit of a screen for those that you don't want, but you can still use the internet and all the services that you like. And I think we'll probably talk about compartmentalizing your business and your personal life, because I think it's a relevant conversation for HR leaders to have when they're thinking about remote work and all the challenges that they're facing in today's day and age. And the other service, that's one service, again, it's called Blur. And the other service that we have is called Delete Me. And Delete Me goes out and finds the personal information that all of us, because we are normal digital citizens for the most part, are being forced to share every day, and finds what data brokers have that information and are exposing it online. When somebody does a search for our name or our family's name or our phone number and our address, all of those things can generate very detailed profiles that come up highly ranked in Google with data brokers that are essentially selling that information to anyone that will buy it.
Without your permission.
So Delete Me goes out, finds that, and removes it for you all year long.
That's incredible. I don't even know where to get started after that. Because people don't really realize how much to give it away, do they, Rob? Because like every time you hit that, for example, just a simple example of like going on a website, you see the cookie pop up. It's basically a tracker. And if you click into that tracker and click see more, you'll see the list of 200 companies that you've now given access to track you. And most people don't even blink an eyelid. They're just like, yeah, fine. Right. And all of a sudden, you're now being tracked by 200 new brands. And if you do that on 20 websites a week or however many, and over months, years, etc., it's pretty crazy.
It is crazy. And what most people, don't know is the data broker industry that takes in all that information has gotten much, much better at correlating it all to our identities and our personal information. So the amount of data available about all of us, typically from data brokers that we've never given it to, that we've never consented to have our information, let alone sell it, is approaching crazy levels. When we started the company, we'd see 400 or 500 individual data points, our family's names, our home addresses, past addresses, old phone numbers. When we did a typical search in Delete Me, now we see over 2,300 data points for the average individual that the data brokers have. So,
wow. It's pretty mind-blowing. And they probably know more about us than we know about our habits and our, than we do. It's pretty scary. So let's kind of put this in an employer perspective as well. Something that you mentioned when you reached out, which really attracted me, was talking about employee relocation and identity theft. What is it that employers need to know in this area? Well,
particularly given COVID and the trend towards remote work, relocation is becoming, I think, a much more prevalent issue than it was before. Certainly here in the U.S. and I think globally, employees now have options that they never had before and never considered. So every time there's relocation to deal with, there's a tremendous amount of personal information data that's been generated around that with a move. And some of it is public record, which means the data brokers are scraping it just as soon as it shows up in the database and connecting it often to the company, to the role of the individual, and building these data sets about us that have different risks. And we can talk about those risks, if you like.
Yeah, what are the risks? Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, well, I think for an organization, when you're thinking as an HR leader or a security leader, when you're thinking about the risks of all of this exposure of personal information, how easy it is to just type in a quick query to Google and see the employees that you have and the executives and even the board members of a company. So from the leaders all the way down to the run-of-the-mill everyday workers, the ability to connect all the dots for somebody leads to a variety of risks. One category is just cybersecurity risks. People can now create incredibly detailed phishing attacks where they can impersonate or spoof the CEO or the CFO or somebody from your family or somebody from accounting, and they can ask for a password and, or ask for some money to be sent somewhere. And these, unfortunately, the phishing hackers have a lot of time on their hands. And as they build these and look at their own data, because they're data driven just like the rest of us, they can see what works and what doesn't. And so the more personalized they can make these kinds of phishing emails and spoofing attacks, the more dangerous and the more susceptible employees are to giving up information when they think only the company could have this kind of information about me or my family or my date of birth or my role at the company and that sort of thing. So that's one area, is just threats to the company's network, to the security of the company's network through exposed personal information.
Mm-hmm. What about the fact that with remote now, people are logging in to work with their own laptops, own phones, computers? Even me at home, I've got my HR leader's email, my personal email on the same computer. I switch between both. What are the risks now? I'm sure people are doing personal things and other things on work laptops and stuff like that.
Absolutely. I mean, everything is commingled now with work from home. And so what you were just referring to, all the tracking, the cookies, the collection of our email addresses, and whether we're giving them the company email or our personal email, it's all getting commingled. And as soon as these data brokers get one piece of information, they can tie it to all these other pieces of information. So the idea that we can separate and keep secure the company personal information that you're using when you're working from home and your regular personal information is becoming a fantasy of the past.
Yeah, because I see most, so for example, with some of the podcasts I do, some of the CHROs struggle to get into even Zoom because they have a VPN. Is the VPN the go-to way for companies to protect themselves? It seems like most companies now, you can't log on to X, Y, and Z websites without logging into your VPN first. Is that the number one method that is working?
Well, it's one layer of security that the corporate networks ought to be using for almost every system, as well as two-factor authentication with your phone. Yeah. But those things, they're sort of necessary but not sufficient, because unfortunately, they do very little to protect the actual personal information that we're sharing with these third parties.
I see what you're saying.
They will protect your IP address, but your IP address is just one of many
ways they can get in. Yeah. So what can companies and people like myself, everyone listening, what are some of the things that we can do to protect ourselves?
Sure.
Some fundamental things.
We're always asked that question, being a privacy and security company, and there's actually some good answers, and it doesn't start with, hey, change your whole life, and when you wake up in the morning, think about privacy when you go online, because none of us do that. Yeah. Let's be realistic. We're all busy. We're busier now with COVID and work from home and all of the challenges that we have. So, what I typically say is use an ad blocker in your browser, because that does stop a lot of those hundreds of tracking cookies that you were referring to earlier. And use two-factor authentication on your phone for your key accounts, unique passwords in a password manager, and a VPN when you're logging into systems. And all of those things together, really do an effective job. And the key thing is they're pretty easy.
Anyone can download a Chrome extension or exactly. For the password manager, do you have any ones that you recommend? Because that's something I've been looking at recently, because there's so many now. I know I'm putting you on the spot, but is there a go-to password manager you suggest? Right.
Well, if you're into this whole privacy aspect of things and not being tracked, I'm gonna be biased and recommend Blur, the product I was talking about. That's the password manager that also protects your credentials. But other than that, I'm a fan of 1Password. They've done a tremendous job. But frankly, in a way, they all have their their quirks and their annoyances. And if you can just use any one of them for sort of a month or two and get beyond those annoyance factors, I think they turn out to be tremendously helpful and are a good thing to do. And of course, the other thing is to make sure your information, going back to our delete me side of the business, to make sure your information isn't super easy to find out there, all of the details about your personal contacts and your family members and everything else. And the good news there is it's also not that hard to remove it from a bunch of these data brokers. And in fact, we have a free guide on our website that helps people do that.
There's quite a few steps though, because I remember looking at for example, I think it was like 20 steps or actions it takes on like Google Chrome to stop people from tracking your cookies. And I was like, so if an average person, and that's with a guide, that's like with me following through a guide, I was like, the average person's gonna have no idea that this is happening to them or have any control over it.
That's right. So, I think the key thing for making security and privacy effective is to make it easy for people. And that's, where we're going as a business and where we're collaborating with HR leaders and CISOs is to try to make the detection and removal of all this information that can cause these different risks to spring up more and more now that we're working from home and more now that we're relocating. What we're trying to do is just make it easy. We're trying to give HR leaders a report saying, hey, here's where your most exposed people are, your executives, your key at-risk employees, your different groups, your diversity, equity, and inclusion groups. All of those people have different levels of exposure, and we're just trying to make the reporting, the service, so simple that you can protect yourself. Any organization can protect themselves from these risks on an ongoing basis without having to really become an expert or to make anyone on their teams become an expert in doing this.
Yeah, exactly. They've got enough to deal with right now.
Yes, they do.
Yes, they do. That's the last thing they probably would want to be. So what are some of the other compliance risks for organizations from increased remote work, for example?
Yeah, well, we talked about the security risks. I think the HR risks are almost, in some ways more apropos and prevalent these days, which are around doxing, cyberbullying, harassment. These things are, especially in work from home, where you said people are using the same computers now to do everything, and our apps on our phones and everything. What we're seeing is companies are having to deal with incidents where customers, former employees, crazy people on the internet are going after specific individuals and exposing them, trying to, we had an incident where not even a senior executive, but somebody in the company, it was a games development company, and somebody playing the game was angry. I know you're a gamer, Chris. So they sent in an email to the person's home email address with a bomb icon on it. And so there's all kinds of online harassment that's taking place these days because everybody else is sitting around at home also. So I think it's unfortunately a new area where HR is becoming responsible when there's a credible threat, when there's somebody that has information about where you live and where your family lives, and they put that in a threatening blog post or an email or somewhere on social media. This is a new area that HR has to deal with, and they're telling us, hey, what can we do?
Yeah, that's pretty scary. And given the fact that we've all a lot of the big move to remote, as you said, this is a new area and it's probably going to increase, unfortunately. And we do a lot of work around mental health and well-being as well, and that's obviously a big priority for organizations. And again, this is another area we need to pay close attention to. Like you're saying,
I think the well-being area is probably the most positive part of all this, right? How can we bring, I think HR is also looking for, what is the well-being roadmap for the next few years, and how does COVID and a hybrid work environment change that? And one of the things we do here, and again, I'm biased. I run the company. We believe in our service, but we do hear a lot from our individual consumers and employees that we protect the privacy of them and their families on. That, hey, I just feel
the peace of mind, right?
Better.
Yeah, the peace of mind to know that you're protected and your family's protected, your financial well-being, your physical and financial well-being protected as well. It's super important. You're not safe online or in physical. They find a way. That's what I'm trying to get at. They find a way.
And it changes, right? So I don't think these guys really need to go through the rubbish bins anymore. They can just go online to these data brokers.
100%.
And, it's a lot easier.
Yeah. Why is it so easy for them to monetize information? And because there's companies out there, kind of quite well-known brands that also sell our information that many people don't even know about. Why is it so easy for them to do that?
Well, it's a great question. And, my personal view is simply that the regulators and our societies and governments didn't catch all of the bad practices that grew up during the internet, and they let the whole technology industry develop without any rules and regulations. And only now, in the last 5 years, have we seen, the GDPR really start to take shape. And in the USA here, we have some copycat legislation from that called the CCPA in California and 4 or 5 other states. But what we are seeing is, but even beyond the U.S. and Europe, Brazil just passed a big piece of privacy legislation, and even China earlier in the year put together some information protection laws. And so globally, what I think I am seeing is governments and the people, the societies, say, hold on a second, we kind of got this wrong. And no, people shouldn't be able to do whatever the heck they want with our data.
Yeah. The problem is, though, we've got a culture where people don't really understand what they're giving up. They're happy to use a Facebook or another social media or TikTok and give away everything, all information to use these free, and we know they're not free, platforms just to give up all of that data. And it's like no one even thinks about it. They just put the information in and then that's it. They're just like, it's crazy when you think about it.
And it's not our fault. Like,
no,
it's really, I like to bring that point up because, it's so easy for security people to get on their high horse and start blaming everybody else for not, doing all the right things. But it's not about that. We have to change. We are all busy. We all have things to do every day when we get up, and we can't be responsible for, setting 20 different things and remembering another 30 things just to keep us safe and secure. Things that we do have to be easy, and they have to enable us to live our lives and do our jobs quickly because that's what society demands.
Yeah, you're right. And that's where you guys come in. And just so we don't have to think about that, and give us the flexibility and time that we need, and trust that this is happening through services that you offer as well. Another question which has come up in the community, and it's quite a sensitive one, which I wanted to get your thoughts on, is talking about companies. There's been a lot of talk about should businesses use vaccine passports as part of their return to the office strategy. So it's not many companies have made a hard stance on it, as you can imagine. It's a conversation happening within our community. Love to hear your thoughts.
Yeah, we talk a lot, and we've been tracking and doing our own privacy surveys inside of our customer community and outside around vaccine passport data and the privacy concerns around it, because I don't think we've ever globally been in a situation where all of a sudden we were talking as an entire world about what kind of data we need to show each other for what kind of context. If we're going to a sports game, are we going to need to show that venue data? If we're going to a concert, or a restaurant? Obviously, everybody's familiar with international travel as a scenario, but there's so many scenarios, and really what happens to that data after we show it, and what additional data. And then we see the health data showing up in the data, at the data brokers that we go find and remove information from. So it's a real concern at sort of the highest level of how much information are we going to need to be sharing to stop the threat of COVID, and then whatever happens after COVID. In terms of return to work is in some ways work is just another venue. It might be the one that you go to most often.
It's true.
But it's simply another venue. And I think, at least in the U.S., where the debate is hot and heavy, and we're full of as a society, we got started because we don't like the government, right? No offense, Chris, but there's a lot of people out there that are highly skeptical of the vaccines, and unfortunately, whatever your viewpoint is, they're going to be part of the conversation. And look, I get that it's a sensitive issue for HR. From our perspective, every single venue that including the workplace, it should have the right independently to create their own policies and procedures. And quite simply, the safety of the greater community is what every venue owner or every workplace owner needs to put first and foremost. If that means requiring proof of vaccination or else work from home or find another job, I think that's quite a fair policy given the dynamics of COVID and the current situation. I would simply ask all the people creating the policies and procedures to not store the data in a database for perpetuity after you do create the policies, because what I don't want to happen is a massive trove of personal health information to be created that never dies, never is deleted, just because we have to, as a community, we have to figure out a way to beat COVID.
Yeah. So where ideally would this information be stored then? Would it be within their own, for example, HCM solution within for example, if you're a HR executive?
I would prefer it to be stored on their client in an app or in a container that stays with the individual. Mm-hmm. and if the company, for reporting purposes or compliance purposes, needs to store it, have a clear policy of when it is going to be deleted, and do not assume that you need it forever. At some point, God willing, we're going to get beyond COVID.
Yeah, that's definitely good advice, because I'm sure there's no case study for this.
There isn't, but the last 10 years of the internet have been a case study of what not to do.
That's true.
Don't think about the data and think about privacy when you're starting out.
So it sounds like that kind of scenario of people collecting data and it just sitting there happens a lot, from what you're saying, in organizations.
It's the default, unfortunately.
Really? That's so unfortunate. So when you work with HR executives, what are the typical concerns they have when they come to you and reach out?
Typically, what we're finding is there's an incident or a series of incidents that they've been dealing with on an ad hoc basis, on a one-off basis. And they can be related to online harassment and doxing. They could be related to information exposure that creates uncomfortable issues around former employees or angry customers or what we call very exposed people that are in the media that are representing the organization from a reputational standpoint. So really, they're really coming to us and saying, hey, we've been dealing with this and we don't have even a name for it. We don't even have...
They don't even know how to quantify it. But unfortunately, they only come to you, Rob, when there's an issue, which is part of the problem.
That's right. That's right. Unfortunately, it's been, hey, we've been dealing with this and, again, on a very issue-driven ad hoc basis. And we come to them and say, hey, look, here's the good news. We can help you solve this problem. It's not, there's no perfect silver bullet solution, but we can help you. We can give you all of the kind of reporting and analytics that and I think you're having a people analytics conference coming up, which sounds exciting, especially given COVID and remote work. We can give HR execs all the analytics around every single piece of exposed data on every risk level in every department, every exec, every employee, and we can show them and help them prove the case that information exposure reduction and mitigation does do a significant part in mitigating these risks on an ongoing basis. So employees not only have better peace of mind when we're talking about well-being, and they can see in their family's information and their information is no longer as easy to find, is no longer exposed by these data brokers, but also you see a reduction in incidents around harassment, doxing, and other things that are plaguing HR departments, and they don't have a name for the category yet.
Mm-hmm. When you're chatting to them, because I'm sure for many companies it's relatively new, they may have never worked for a company like yourself before. How do you justify the ROI?
It's a great question. Like I said, we're lucky enough to have very, very concrete and specifically granular data on all of the information that is exposed. So we can run a risk analysis in combination with HR to look at each department and to look at each risk group. And then we can show them which information is exposed where. And then they can come to their own conclusion using benchmarks that we provide as to what kind of coverage they'd like for the organization and what kind of risk mitigation in terms of both incidents on the one side and satisfaction and well-being on the other side that they'd like to target. But it's an ongoing process, Chris.
No, of course. And we've seen it in the media though, right? So like we've seen companies where it's like, all of a sudden they're being held at ransom from cybersecurity attacks where they've just stolen their employee data as well. And these are big, these are the ones we see in the news quite often now. In the past, you'd see that just maybe now and again, but it feels like every week I'm seeing another company that's been hacked and their employee data and their customer data has been stolen. And it's like, it's hitting the news every week and it's getting more and more. And, I think recently there was a company that actually paid the ransom. I can't remember the name. I don't want to say it on the podcast, but they paid it in Bitcoin. And
there's a tremendous, it's a sort of a open secret in the industry, but there's a tremendous amount of companies that are paying ransomware fees to get their data back. And in some cases, sadly, it's the right thing to do because business must go on, and they failed to keep a current backup copy of their entire network. Often Windows-based exploits are what happens. But even in ransomware, we a third-party analysis and our analysis shows that maybe 30 to 40% of those attacks originate from phishing.
That's a crazy statistic that you just said there, but unfortunately, I'm not surprised as well. And it's something we don't really think about. That's why, again, I really thank you so much again for coming on the show, because this is a really important conversation to have, I think now more than ever. And I feel like we just don't really think about it. Even as an employer myself, I do have data sitting around that probably isn't as secure as it should be. Yes, we have a CRM and we have those other things, but Every organization has an Excel spreadsheet sitting somewhere, that isn't as protected as we think it should be.
Right. And unfortunately, every organization's data is less secure when the organization's people's data is
exactly. You can't even control that. How do you even control that as well? That's the point. It's you need you. Yeah, we need you. So before I let you go, then, what advice? And we've covered quite a lot, and we could talk about this forever. To be honest, there's a lot. But what advice would you give to HR executives that are listening right now?
Everyone has to have their roadmap of priorities. There's so much going on out there.
That's the problem, yeah.
Between the future of work, the analytics that you need, diversity, equity, and inclusion efforts, and so, my message to HR leaders is simply, hey, there is this emerging risk area that is related to privacy. It is connected to security. It is connected to well-being, and it is connected to corporate reputation risk. And if it is not your number one priority, which I highly doubt it is, given all the challenges that everyone's facing, at least know that it's out there, and know that there are services, not just Delete Me, but others that can help on an ongoing basis, and hopefully, with a reasonable budget, to mitigate that risk without you having to spin up new employees and deal with a whole lot of issues, and perhaps they're already dealing with it and using HR human resources that we can free up. Mm-hmm. So prioritize and understand that this privacy risk is real, and there's ways to deal with it, and we're working hard and trying to collaborate with global companies that are innovating here.
Fantastic. Well, Rob, where can people reach you personally if they want to reach out to you personally, say hello, and also learn more about the work you're doing?
Sure.
In the business.
Rob at abine.com, abine.com is an easy way to find me. And joindeleteme.com is where you can find more information for individuals and for business organizations that want to take a look at our offering. We'd love to talk.
Fantastic. And I'm assuming if I Google you, I may not find much. It's going to be, they probably do.
Well, my last point is, for all of us, executives, media professionals, people that are, more in the spotlight, and for everyone else, there's information that we absolutely want to be available about us, and it's critical that I point out, Delete Me removes none of that. We don't delete information that you want, that's positive, that builds your credibility, your reputation, mm-hmm. That sort of thing. We only remove information from data brokers you haven't consented to. So I think it is important when HR thinks about reputation, it needs to think about reputation at an individual level also. What happens when people Google all the employees that I'm responsible for? What comes up? Is it people selling their personal information, or is it positive
100%
positive content?
Yeah, and also people listening, it's the same thing when your employer Googles you. What and which companies are doing more and more now. Personally, when I'm hiring someone, I do that. It just out of instinct. I'm just like, not because I'm trying to find some hidden secret they have. It's just natural now to see, I wonder who this person is, and you just Google their name, right? It's just how it is now. So you have to be very conscious of maybe what's out there. You might have that picture from when you was 18 on a stag do somewhere on holiday, getting drunk somewhere or doing something stupid. That's still out there. That's still on the internet somewhere.
That's right. And you might not also be surprised, Chris, that 11% of all of Google searches are for other people.
Of course. Yeah, not surprised whatsoever. No worries. Well, look, Rob, thanks for coming on the show. It means a lot. And for everyone listening, I hope you enjoyed this. So something new. And I love the work you're doing, Rob. I think it's so important and just something that people just don't think about enough, especially our audience and the HR leaders that we're working with and the millions and millions of employees that they take care of. I think it's super important. I know you're all listening. You've got a lot of work to do right now as well. And we appreciate that. But this is something we wanted to bring to your attention. So I wish you all the best, Rob, and I'll chat to you again soon.
Thanks. Look forward to the next conversation, Chris.
Thanks.